People who don't live in Birmingham are absolutely amazed when they see this site, because they think of Birmingham as a dirty, grimy place, not a thing of beauty.
You've got the finest little collection of wildlife, anything you care to mention, in England. That's my opinion, and I shall stick at that.
I take parties of people, and they're quite amazed. They just can't believe that they're anywhere near Birmingham.
Like, it's something good for the community, and it's better than staying at school and doing work, really.
Every day at dusk, these starlings fly to the warmth and shelter of Birmingham city centre to roost. Even here in the heart of the city, where many people no longer choose to live, wildlife can still find a refuge. We traditionally think of the countryside as being the place to find wildlife and not the city, but today's modern farming methods are threatening the existence of our wild plants and animals. As more and more hedgerows are grubbed up, and as more and more wetlands are drained, as more and more farmers become dependent on chemicals to produce their crops, wildlife is finding that the urban environment is a much more favourable place in which to live. Railway lines, rivers, canals and roadside verges have become green corridors along which the plants and animals can spread deep into the towns and cities to colonise new territories. Patches of waste ground, gardens, churchyards, back alleys and undisturbed parkland also provide good wildlife habitat within the built-up area. Plants and animals depend on each other for their survival. The particular kind of place that each needs to live in is called its habitat. The more different kinds of habitat that exist, the greater the number of different plants and animals that will be found. Nature conservation is about the protection of existing habitats and the creation of new ones. Even this mown grass can support a few insects. Trees can support even more, and they also help to reduce the noise of traffic and filter out the dust pollution from the air. Daily contact with nature can provide city people with opportunities for relaxation and excitement. Wild landscapes make ideal places to walk the dog, to build dens, to watch the birds, or just sit and think. This video is about nature conservation in the city, and it is based on the experiences of people living in the West Midlands county. Nature conservation can be achieved in many different ways. Some people try to get the local council to change the way they look after public open space. If the parks gardeners can be persuaded to let some patches of grass grow long, this will encourage wildflowers to flourish and thus attract more butterflies and insects, which in turn provide the food for birds, hedgehogs and shrews. Some of them are involved in larger projects like community nature parks. These are nature areas cared for by the local people who use them. Others are involved in smaller projects, perhaps on a piece of wilderness near where they live or at their schools. Some people start at home in their own back gardens.
Again, these are all grown as everything else in this garden without any sort of herbicides or pesticides and only the use of natural methods. Oak trees are probably some of the most valuable trees to have, since there are several hundred types of insects and creatures use an oak tree, from the very tiniest ones you can hardly see right up to squirrels, which you may be lucky to see running up and down this particular oak.
There was originally an avenue of oaks in the area, but these are the only ones that have survived from the buildings. You will see that there's a natural walk through a bank of trees where there'll be bluebells, snowdrops, primroses, cowslips that can go in wild and make a natural feature of the walk. And it's good for wildlife.
Geoffrey and Margaret Eyre are preserving a piece of old countryside that is now part of the city. Anne Reeves has created a wildflower garden at her home on a busy city road, with plants like sloe, honeysuckle and broom. She grew the plants from seeds that she collected in the countryside, and the garden is now being used by bees and butterflies, birds, hedgehogs and foxes.
We like having a buddleia because in the summer it's full of butterflies, and we like growing berries because that encourages birds. At the back there's lots of sedum that attracts tortoiseshell butterflies. This pool was constructed about 6 months ago from marked stones from a wood yard and a polythene liner. The plants haven't got established yet. There's water lily and duckweed, and there are quite a few fishes. And I know that there are lots of frogs in, but I should imagine they've started to hibernate. And they've left a little entrance at the end with stones so that the frogs can hop in and out.
It needn't be a big pond. Even an old sink in the odd corner can provide a home for plants, insect larvae and frogs. Anne's enthusiasm for wildlife led to her getting involved in a campaign to save a hedge at the school where she worked.
One day, some bulldozers came in and they pulled up and dug up the whole of the hedge in the other field. And we were all very upset because it was a hedge, I should say, 200 or 300 years old. And we just didn't want the other hedges pulled up because they are really beautiful hedges with sloes, hips, haws, blackberries, and everything you can think of in them. And they provided wonderful dens for the children to play in. So we decided to get up a petition. And we went round all the houses and the flats, and only one person objected because she said people would probably lurk behind the hedge and frighten the children. But nearly everyone said, no, we don't want the hedges pulled down because they provide a great amenity, really. They hide the flats, they hide the other houses, they give a windbreak, and we just don't want the hedges to go. So they all signed, and I sent it to Auchinleck House, and I got a nice letter back saying that as people felt so strongly, for the moment, they would suspend operations.
A lot of land is owned by education authorities, and there are a lot of things that schools can do to encourage wildlife into their grounds, such as planting new hedgerows, making butterfly gardens, and even building ponds. Even a school with a concrete playground can make a tree nursery by growing saplings in pots. This particular school is lucky enough to have a small patch of soil by the canteen.
Oh yes. The money for the projects that we've done here has come from two sources mainly. The children of the school raised money to buy trees, and we got in touch with the Shell Better Britain campaign and managed to scrounge £125 from them. And that's gone to buy 150 small trees that we're going to grow on in our nursery.
We built this pond a couple of weeks ago and filled it all in with cement. And now we're planting trees over there. We're doing it in our lunch hours and break times any time we can. Sometimes we come in on Saturdays and clean the pond out.
We decided to do a project on my school because we looked around and it was getting into quite a state, we thought. And we wrote down that we thought we could do the bird garden, a pond, some more hedgerows and something like benches. Before the project in school, we were taking part in another one at York's Wood. That developed basically because it was turned into a bit of a tip. It's a piece of woodland. It's not very big, but it's in an estate, and so really it's a good place for people to be able to go to get away from the blocks of flats and the rows of houses. We decided that we could clear it up a bit and see if we could make it any better. And there's a little pond in there. I spent several weeks wading in the water, dragging out bits of cars and that sort of thing. And we had a big day where about 400 people, I think, came along and filled a bag with rubbish and dumped it at the end of the wood, and we filled up skips and had it all taken away and cleared the rubbish out. And now an action group's been formed and the local residents have taken part. And that's what you need really if you're going to do anything, because if the people around it aren't involved, it's no good. You can't go along to something and say, right, we're going to clear up your wood for you, you all stand around and watch us and we'll make it lovely for you. If they're involved, they'll take some pride in it, and it's more likely to last.
York's Wood is the last remaining bit of Chelmsley Wood, now a housing estate. It was in danger of becoming the local rubbish dump before the clean-up campaign began. Local residents organised a fun day in the wood with a nature trail, games and a film show, and people sold things that they had made to raise money for fencing.
We don't want to keep people out, we just want to stop them going in with the wheelbarrows with the rubbish. So this is why the fencing has been put in so close. We're not leaving any gaps, any archways, we're having kissing gates and that sort of thing. It isn't the children that are actually dumping the rubbish, it's the mums and dads, it's the adults that are causing that havoc.
Domestic rubbish does little permanent damage, but it is unsightly. Broken glass cans and metals present more of a danger to animals. Clearing litter up can be a good way for schools or youth clubs to have fun while helping their local community. They can also help to watch out for more damaging threats to the land, like industrial pollution. Plantsbrook in Pipe Hayes, Birmingham, was in danger when a planning application was made to use land next door.
This area of land is privately owned, and a couple of years ago a proposal was put in to fill it to about 3 times my height with industrial, toxic and domestic waste. Now clearly that would have had disastrous effects. So we got together with the residents to put in an objection to the planning application for the tipping of waste and put up a very, very strong case that there should be no development on this site. And the inspector agreed with us, and hopefully the site itself is now protected as an area of open space, but more important to us, the community nature park itself is protected. It's not just what is actually going on your site that's so important, it's also what's going on all around, and you must be aware of that.
There are often conflicts of interest in deciding a use for a piece of land. It may be needed for housing or roads, factories or refuse disposal. Moseley Bog was once an old mill pool, but since the dam was breached more than 100 years ago, the site has been left relatively undisturbed. However, recently it was threatened by a proposal to build houses and divert the springs that feed the bog and which make it a very special wetland site. While naturalists convinced the government that it should be protected as a site of special scientific interest, local residents who use the site for recreation got enormous publicity with their action campaign.
When I started the campaign, there was just me and my neighbour, and we decided somebody ought to do something if this building was going to go ahead and damage an area that we thought was so beautiful. We'd no idea about rare plants or anything like this. The first thing we did was actually to call a public meeting, and when hundreds of people turned up, I was absolutely shattered. I honestly did not expect that. I thought we might get 6 or 7, and form a little committee or something, but when actually hundreds of people turned up, in a month to get 12,500 signatures is pretty amazing, really. The Bog Management Committee is made up of local residents, of representatives from the Education Committee, from the Nature Conservancy Council, King Edward's Grammar School, Aston, who do the majority of the donkey work on the committee, and they also do the physical work on site.
The School Conservation Club come down to the bog every Wednesday afternoon instead of having games lessons. They're also listing all the kinds of plants and animals that can be found here and encouraging other schools to use the site for field work.
It's interesting, you know, and we get exercise out of it as well. You know, so like it's something good for the community. And
if you're interested in natural history or anything like that, then it's a very good job to do. There's a lot of manual work in it, if you're good with your hands. If you just enjoy the outdoors.
The British Trust for Conservation volunteers are teaching them the skills they need to do the practical work. BTCV will also help new groups to start up and to get funds.
What we've been using here are local materials that have just been found on the site. There's no actual money to buy timber for these steps, so we've just been collecting driftwood from the streams, pointing off our own stakes which have been cut down from the sycamore in the wood, and just basically making use of what we've got. Yeah, the main reason we need the steps is obviously to improve access into and around the site. This is a particularly steep bank which people were just having to scramble up before. The steps will obviously improve access there. There's also been a lot of work done on improving the footpaths around the site. We're planning to build some boardwalks and actually lay some chippings in certain places. And by actually having a system of footpaths, it does help to guide people away from sensitive areas, particularly where there's the rarer plants growing on this site, such as the wood horsetail. And also it limits disturbance to nesting birds. The BTCV, I should say, act as a catalyst in trying to set groups like this in motion at Moseley Bog. We've now got about 8 group members throughout the West Midlands, including groups in Bilston, Dudley, Walsall, throughout Birmingham, 1 or 2 school groups.
Even the most natural seeming site will need some management if it is to retain its character. For instance, if a wildflower meadow is left ungrazed, it will gradually become first scrubland and then a wood. Cutting the meadow once a year in the autumn, after the flowers have gone to seed, and raking off the cuttings to reduce fertility will keep it as a meadow. Dudley Conservation volunteers are helping in the management of the Saltwells Nature Reserve near Netherton. Here, Dudley Council employ an educational field officer and 4 wardens to look after the reserve and to encourage local people to come and use the site.
See, some of these south-facing banks want clearing because there's a little bit too much vegetation evolving in this area, and woodland is no good for snakes. They like bare areas, bare hillsides, south-facing, to bathe in the sun.
We've come here today to clear some trees, small trees mainly, from this area of the clay pit across here, because it is south-facing and it's a good area for birds who nest in the ground, and lizards and other animals which like the open spaces rather than the dense woodland. Particularly at this site here, you get a number of local people turning up, and often they're fairly young. Some of them here today are teenagers, or in 1 or 2 cases even younger. The main thing is to get them interested, and wardens do a lot of the work here at Saltwells Nature Reserve to get the children interested in the wildlife in the area, and sometimes to actually do practical work to improve it.
This here is what the kids collected, acorns, seedlings of all sorts, right? And hopefully we'll grow them on for the future plant out in the wood. And we also started tree nurseries at schools for children to get their interest. We're going to keep a cycle going now of tree planting with the children and to keep their interest alive. And over the 20-year period where we're going to get rid of the sycamores, which, as you know, is a woodland weed, and we'll keep replacing with oak, mainly oak, but birch and all sorts of other trees.
All trees should be respected, but sycamores are best kept out of our native woodlands. They were introduced from Europe in the 16th century, and only a few kinds of insects can live on them. Sycamores can quickly spread throughout a wood, crowding out the other trees and casting a deep shade so that the wood appears dark and unfriendly, and wildflowers cannot grow there. There are a whole range of habitats in the reserve. woodland, scrubland, meadows, pools, wetlands and cliffs, and there are consequently a large number of different plants and animals living there.
We've got an expert on snails and slugs, and he's found a snail what's extremely rare to this area. And it's rare in other parts of the country, but it's extremely rare to this part. So that's another good find. Along with this bloke's fungus, expert fungus bloke, he's found a very rare fungi as well, which is called an earth star. So we're doing quite well. We've got rare plants, orchids.
We've got snakes, we've got lizards, we've got newts, we've got frogs, we've got toads. In this clay pit alone, there are about 20 to 26 species of bird, not counting the woodland, right? Just this little bit here.
Dalton's clay pit is an old quarry, now completely colonised by wildlife. It is threatened by plans to dump the spoil from open cast mining there.
If you look at it and think about it, this was dug out by the people in the Black Country with a pick and a shovel and nothing else. No mechanical aids, bulldozers or diggers, just with a pick and a shovel. And the people in the Black Country, I think, have given enough to the people, the industrialists and all the top people who've made the money out of the Black Country. And it's time they give a little back. I think this should be left as it is and preserved for all time, just as it is, for the people here in the Black Country to come daily and enjoy it. It's amazing the amount of people that do come here, weekends and in the week, as well as all the local children. It's been a play area and a beauty spot for many, many years.
Nature has turned many a tip and slag heap into a thing of beauty, colonising it in the same way as it would volcanic rock. At Lady Moore Road, local residents and the Bilston Conservation Association got Wolverhampton Council to preserve a wild site dominated by slag. If the council had done the usual cosmetic type of landscaping, covering the site with neatly manicured grass and lollipop trees, it would have had little value for wildlife. However, the short grass at the edge of the site by the road does give it a tidy, well cared for appearance. Here at Peascroft Wood in Bilston, the Midland Reforestation Association planted trees 75 years ago on old slag heaps. They were trying to cover up some of the worst scars that industry had left on the Black Country landscape. These bicycles can't do much damage to the wood, but some places are used by motorbike scramblers, and this not only causes annoyance because of the noise and the fumes, but it also damages the soil structure so that plants can no longer grow there. It's not an answer to try and ban motorcyclists if there is nowhere else provided for them to go scrambling. It's important that all the local people are involved in choosing what they want a piece of land to be used for. At Lecky Road in Walsall, they decided on an ambitious scheme, but it's working because everyone is involved.
At the moment, we've got all the planting areas surrounded by chestnut paling fencing. This is to protect the trees from children running straight over them, but also to delineate the areas. And when the trees have grown up, we've got shrubs beneath them that we've planted, these will provide a very good woodland area that in 5 years' time will not require the fencing, and we will take this down. Then further out we'll have woodland planting, woodland flowers such as foxgloves, along the grass, and then this will grade into a shorter grass, and in the centre a kickabout area. And then we have the pool over to the right, where we'll have yellow flag iris and bulrushes surrounding the edge of the pool, which will then provide a different habitat that will have different insects and different animals. And we'll have the waterfowl, well, ducks from the local parks coming onto here, as we have done in other sites around the West Midlands.
The site belongs to the Walsall Housing Department, but it cannot be built on because of subsidence. The council have found that the scheme will actually cost far less than the type of landscaping that they normally do. It's through the local neighbourhood office that the community have become involved.
One Saturday, a couple of us from the office, because we were right next door to it, came and put our wellies on and just waded in and shifted all the rubbish out and got a skip to take it away. Interestingly enough, the kids in the area saw us doing this and just came in and joined in, and within 20 minutes there was quite a crowd of us shifting the rubbish out of the pond. Not the normal role for a local government official, but nonetheless very worthwhile. The children were obviously very interested in what was going to be going on the site. We then recruited the help of the Urban Wildlife Group, particularly with the emphasis on community involvement. We decided to concentrate mainly in the early stages in involving 2 schools which are very nearby, and it's hoped that each school will take on responsibility for the maintenance and planting of certain sections of the site. By doing this, obviously it increases the involvement of the local children, but it also provides the schools with an opportunity to bring nature conservation into their school curriculum.
Some of the work of path laying and fencing at Lecky Road has been done by workers on a job creation scheme funded by the Manpower Services Commission. Here at Harborne in Birmingham, another MSC team is creating a nature trail along an old railway line. People can now go for a country walk in the heart of the city. Coventry City Council, in conjunction with the Warwickshire Nature Conservation Trust, are creating an experimental nature ground on land in the city that cannot be used for building because of drainage problems.
One of the great things about the Bell Green project is that although the site was intended to be a conservation garden, a haven for wildlife, it's also proved enormously popular for local kids. It's turned into a very successful play area. There are lots of dens in the undergrowth, kids race around the place on their bikes and so on. But that doesn't detract from its value for conservation as well. There's still plenty of nesting sites for the birds, there's still plenty of quiet out-of-the-way corners. So it's proved very successful in serving a variety of functions, both for wildlife and for local kids. We intend putting benches in so that people on the way back from the shops can sit down and have a rest and put their feet up and look at the wildflowers and listen to the birds singing and so on.
It is the councils that are ultimately responsible for planning decisions, but they are responsive to pressure and they are becoming more aware of the value of natural areas in towns and cities. As well as managing sites themselves, they can provide help in the form of grants and labour to any group wanting to look after an area of public open space themselves and ensure that the wildlife is protected and the desires of the people using the site are met. The Urban Wildlife Group and the Conservation Trust can help people negotiate with the council as they are here at Plants Brook.
You might think, gracious me, we can't do this. It's quite a step, but one thing is to enjoy a site, but to actually think in terms of leasing it is a frightening proposition. But in fact, we've found that the City Council have been very helpful. The Plants Brook Community Nature Park Management Committee was set up, quite a mouthful I'm afraid, and that was specifically set up to try and make sure that this site will be kept forever as such a delightful atmospheric place, even on a gusty old autumn day like today.
In the space of half an hour, it's only been possible to show you a small part of what's happening in the West Midlands, let alone the rest of Britain's urban areas. What we hope we've done is show you that people and wildlife can live in harmony in the cities, and we can enjoy and encourage its existence. We have the power to help or to destroy it. As you've seen, a lot is being done, but there's much more that could be done, and could be done by you. So if you want to help, find out what's happening to the open spaces in your area and get involved.
In a couple of years I can come back and have a look at all the fish in the pond and have a look at the trees we planted.
A place like this is absolutely teeming with life of all sorts, and this is the way to keep it, and the only way to keep it is as far as possible to work with nature.
And you do feel that you've had a holiday, even after an hour's walk around a place like this.